Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host Tony J. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you can get more videos coming your way. Got another one for you today. Today we talking about what's going on around the internet world. Of course, the question that still persists to this day and that's been talked about and discussed this week has been the issue of why black men are not going to college. And I've seen this all over TikTok. And what I've noticed, it's a lot of black women, of course, on TikTok. They're talking about, why black men aren't going to college. It's been in the news. There's been a sharp decrease in enrollment this year alone of a lot of men not attending college or not choosing to go to a 4 year college. And, you know, at my school that I attended, Morgan State, they're having an issue with recruiting and enrolling more black males into Morgan State. But it's happening all across the country. We're seeing a sharp decline, and the gender gap is really widening when it comes to post secondary education after you graduate from high school. Most men have checked out of the working force or the workforce and really have like there's been this phenomenon of abandoning a lot of cornerstones of what used to be manhood. And one of those cornerstones, of course, is a college education. But not only that, you're seeing a lot of men dodge relationships, dodge marriage, people not putting effort into marriage, pursuing any woman for a relationship or marriage, and really for a relationship period. It's like men have gone to the point of checking out of society, and yet mainstream media has not covered this phenomenon too much. I've seen Scott Galloway, the author of The Algebra of Happiness. He's went on CNN to talk about this new phenomenon and how men are being left behind, and particularly white men. But when we talk about black men, well, when we talk about black men, it's always been the case. There's this, it's not really a new discussion or a new conversation about this. It's just an old conversation that has been had for the last, I would say, 37 years. We've been talking about the tragedy of the black male for a very long time. And it just seems like with all the improvements, even with an African American president, that there seems to be this big, huge gender gap when it comes to black men going or enrolling in the college. And last week I took a time to watch School Days and also A Different World. And I honestly I honestly felt as though, you know, there has been this push for the last, I would say, a decade or so to push black men out of college. Now, I know some of you may not believe that, and some of you may not honestly, some of you may take it as a grain of salt, like a pure speculation, but there has been a very big move to push black men out of college life and push black women to the forefront of college education, especially in the black community. One of the things that I noticed, there's two different conversations that have to take place about why black men are not going to college. And we're not having that conversation on in the mainstream. One of the conversations that has to take place, one is on one spectrum, it's environment and what you're surrounded, the messaging that you're getting. And then on the other hand, it's the university and what they're doing to bring more black males into college to be interested in college. We've already had the conversation about the systematic issues surrounding black men. Of course, school to prison pipeline. We've had that conversation. We've had the conversation about the crack epidemic. We know these things. We and sometimes when we talk about it in the mainstream, they always bring up the past that really doesn't really connect well with the present. When you have civil rights pundits talking about, well, you have to look at the issue of slavery, you have to look at the issue of systematic racism, and I'm like, oh, we've talked about that, we've had that discussion, but why not talk about the last 50 50 years where we kind of lost a whole generation of black men, you know. And when we talk about those issues, um, we talk about what happened in the 90s and what happened in the late 80s. A lot of back then it was popular for black men to go to college. What happened that when we have not fostered an environment where we're making black men going to college seem cool the way it was when we had A Different World and Cosby Show, all of them priding themselves on going to places like Morehouse or Hampton University or Spelman and all these other colleges. What is the reason why so many black men are finding it, well, I don't think I'm going to go to college because it's just not for me. What are they missing? Now I could tell you from my personal experience, you could miss a whole lot not going to college. And for me, going to college was important. And it didn't matter whether I was at a white college or a HBCU. It mattered that I actually was striving towards something that actually expanded my mind. And one of the biggest problems when I talk about the issue of environment, when we talk about environment, we have to ask ourselves, well, what are these young black men that don't want to go to college are surrounded by? One of the things I've said, like when I first went to college, social media wasn't really a thing. And we're talking about 16 years ago. What was everything like 16 years ago? That's a pretty long time ago. Whether you believe it or not, 16 years is a pretty damn long time ago. And when I first went to when I was a freshman at Morgan State, social media was just becoming a thing. We didn't have TikTok and all these other things back in 2009. This was just something that to me it was a part of something new. And college for me when I first went, it was a new experience. Like I had to go to college. Like there was no other way I was going to when I first thought about going to college, there was no other way around the idea cuz I saw my friends going to college and I felt like okay, the peer pressure was on me that I had to get into some college just to say that I got into college. And sometimes, if you don't have that peer pressure to do, I mean, the right peer pressure, if you don't have the right peer pressure, it's not going to push you to even consider going to college. At one point, I had considered going to the trades, and in my very last, my senior year, there was this push for me to get into being an automotive mechanic or into HVAC. My father wanted me to consider going into HVAC, and I didn't want to go into HVAC because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life fixing other people's heating systems. Because when you go into people's houses, you do not know what you're getting into. Some people's houses are old. Some people's houses are really dangerous. Like people have broken, outdated furnaces. So I didn't want to spend my life fixing, even though the money was good. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being an HVAC technician, but a majority of the time you're doing a lot of dangerous shit in HVAC. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life, you know, going up under people's furnaces and lighting pilot lights and stuff like that, or fixing or putting in duct tape, um what they call it, making the AC units for the inside of a house. I mean, it looked like something good, but if you had came to me ninth grade year and talked to me about that, I probably would have went into the direction of the trades. But none of my teachers talked to me about working in the trades. Trades weren't an expectation my freshman year of high school. Going to college was an expectation. And 20 years does make a big amount of difference in attitudes. And when I was in high school, I had teachers, they came out of Johns Hopkins University, they came out of Hampton University. One graduated from Morehouse, and he would always show me the pictures of when he was a college student at Hampton and at Morehouse. And they were always like, it was something about me seeing that, and that examples around me was one of the primary reasons why I ended up going to college, because my teacher, my vice principal, uh, he used to talk about his days at Morehouse, and I was always interested in going to Morehouse because he would always tell me how exciting the brotherhood and the Morehouse brotherhood, and he would always tell me stories. He would take me in his office, he would mentor me, he would sit me down, and he would show me pictures of the brotherhood, the camaraderie, and that alone made me want to go to college. And then he also talked about the sisters. And when he talked about how, how beautiful the women were, and that was the first thing that we get put on when we're black men, when we don't think we want to go to college. They always say, hey, well, it's going to be some pretty girls in college. I used to get that talk. Oh, it's going to be some fine women in college. There's some fine sisters. And, you know, that was the motivation. As long as I did well on my SATs, as long as I got good grades in high school, I was good. And, you know, sadly, some of my friends did not get the type of encouragement that I got. Now, I only live about 5 miles away from Morgan State. So I was always surrounded by college people, college students. I was always around college brothers, and they would mentor me. I went to Kuamba program at Morgan State. I was always around college age individuals who took me under their wing when I was like eight 8 years old, and telling me, this could be you. This could be you. And I always say, like, Morgan State was my backyard. So I was always up at Morgan State under the guise of young black men. And one of the things that I've said time and time again, of course, we've had that conversation as well, is the issue of mentorship. We don't mentor enough black boys in our community to where they might want to consider going to college. And when they don't, like, and I'm talking about the last 20 years, like when I was around, attitudes about college, and especially HBCUs and black men going to college, have changed significantly. And this is what I was saying. Like, back then, the popularity of HBCUs and the popularity of going to college was a thing that was a part of the culture of American society. So when we had stuff like A Different World, when we had stuff like Cosby Show, black men were lining up trying to go to college because they saw that imagery. But what imagery do these young boys see now? And we talking about 16, 17-year olds that are about to go off to college as we speak, and they don't have that imagery anymore. What does it do to them? And I remember, and I took the time out to watch School Days, and there's a scene in School Days where they meet in the parking lot at KFC, and then there's the Mission Men versus the Jerry Curls and the Shower Caps and whatnot. And there's this thing between black college men and men in the community that never got a chance to go to college. And what's so crazy is here we are, and we're still having that same problem that was automatically addressed in a movie like School Days, but it was subtly addressed. Not, I don't think Spike really dipped into the classism of that whole situation or that scene, but he subtly talked about the issue that we have some black folks that can't afford to go to college, some black folks that, because of their victim of their own circumstances, that they cannot afford the tuition to go to college. And maybe in some respects, that might be the issue. But you don't see anybody talking like that. What I've seen online the past couple of weeks is like this arrogant tone about black men not wanting to go to college. And the issue kind of stems really from the disdain that black women have for non college educated men. And some of it under the undertones of how they talk about men who don't go to college is kind of a tone deaf way of addressing the real issue. And the real issue right now is the fact that there are young black men who were born during the recession who didn't really feel the full effects of the recession the way that I have, that are now going to college and then had to grapple with the effects of the pandemic. I feel like there's just no way, because this is a lot different from when I first went to college. Because when I first went to college, the expectations for me were very high. They expected me to go to college. There was no, I'm thinking about quitting. I'm thinking about not going. I'm thinking about not finishing. Did it? It was about the expectation. We got that expectation early on because when Obama made it to the White House, young black boys were starting to be prioritized, and the exceptional ones got put in all these programs, and parents were shelling out all this money to make sure they got into the best schools because they knew they had to compete now. But with me, I feel like a lot of young black men, even in college, get a lot of pressure put on it to perform. And I remember the times when I felt as though I had a lot of pressure on me as a black student to perform, and I had expectations for me to be one of these upstanding black men. It's like, when Obama got in the office, I had to compete with that imagery to try and get to that level. But very few, even after we graduate from college, ever get to the same level as an Obama. And that's one of the things that's not being talked about with college, um, is how we perceive black men in terms of their potential to break barriers. With us, with the millennials, we had it early on and bred in us that we had to go to college. There was just no expectation beyond that. You either go to college or you become a statistic. And I guess the expectations back then, we had the the support systems. Our parents, people, our teachers who went to college, and now, you know, basically any other mentors that we get in connection with too. Another thing that's not talked about too within that realm is the issue of class. Some black boys grow up in better neighborhoods than some come from bad neighborhoods and don't get that support system. And I had to understand this because I used to look at other black men as not rising to that potential because I thought that they chose not to rise to that potential. And I remember I took a error. I remember when I first went to college, I kind of had this arrogant tone that if black men, other black men weren't doing exactly what I was trying to do, then they were holding back the race. And I used to think that way, and I used to have this air of superiority that I thought that they just didn't work hard enough, or that they just didn't strive, or they just made excuses not to want to go to college. But the truth is not every black man is going to go to college, and not every black man is going to be fit to be in a college classroom. And a lot of that comes back to the whole issue of we're pushing college on the wrong types of people. Um, some black men, when we get into college, is either on our athletic abilities. And I started to notice, even when I went to Morgan State, there were some black males that just did not want to do any work. They just wanted to show up, and then they had somebody else do their work for them because they didn't really want to go to college because of the academic pursuits, but they went to college because they got an athletic scholarship. And the one thing you don't want to do and you don't want to have in college, because I'm speaking from my experience, is a lot of young black men who are just showing up but not doing the work that it requires to be a college student. And a lot of times when we had black men going to college, average working average working black males, some have to balance a 9 to 5 and then take care of their parents, take care of their family, and that balancing act, sometimes you don't have that luxury to even focus on college, but you're just there, but you don't have that same support system that young girls in college do have. And what I noticed as well, the athletic black male that came in on the athletic scholarship and is a D1 athlete, they get more prioritized than the person that's working two jobs and also balancing taking care of their family, or they like a commuter student. I came in as a commuter student, so majority of the time I came home and went to school at the same time. Couldn't participate fully. I couldn't participate fully in the college experience the way everybody else was because I was a commuter student. So I meandered through college being part time, not going full time. I would take 2 to 4 classes a semester because the workload had to balance out with me being able to take care of my family. So I wasn't on campus all the time. And, with the D1 athletes whom I was friends with, some of them, they didn't want to do any work at all, or they would try to pass off their work as copywritten, and then they get a pass or they get an extension. They got preferential treatment. And I always hated the D1 athletes because, for one, they got more scholarship money than somebody that had a 3.0 or 3.6 GPA. You had to compete very hard to get a scholarship if you were not an athlete. If you were a non-athlete, you barely got any good scholarships. Some D1 athletes got 1,500 per semester taken off of their main tuition or housing. Well, they had all their housing paid for. That's what really frustrated me about being a college student, even for the tenure that I was there at Morgan State. But the main point I want to get back to is that, of course, environment has a lot to do with whether or not somebody is able to go to college. And that's one of the bigger issues. That is one of the bigger issues because if you're not encouraged or compelled to go to college, then you're not going to get in, period. Because your attitude is already dead set on going into the working world. And a lot of younger black males, even today, I think the shift that is happening with college students, well, with high school students, excuse me, is the fact that they don't see college as a prerequisite for life the way that we saw it when we were going into it, you know. And another thing that has really driven a wedge, between black males going to college on two ends is there is an anti-male bias, whether you believe it or not, on black campuses and on white college campuses. There is an anti-male bias that has taken root at a lot of liberal colleges that most men do not want to deal with it. With the issue of Me Too and all these other things, I think a lot of men going to college, they don't want to get looked at as being the college creep. And I think that has done a lot of damage to why there's such a big gender gap in college in general because of how men are perceived on campus. I know when I was on campus as a student, I got tired of the whole, when Women's History Month came around, I got sick and tired of all these programs that were being pushed out for Women's History Month, and it was always this whole um walk a mile in her shoes program, uh V Day, which V Day was crazy. Um V Day was basically that Eve Ensler, uh the Eve Ensler play, the Vagina Monologues. I got sick and tired of that play being on campus, and also men being forced to go see the play. I never liked the play because I felt like it was just like it's just like all together, like you see all this feminist and LGBTQ crap and all this stuff that's become very hostile towards men on campus, and it's always been that way. Like uh, all these this crap with, you know rape culture and all this stuff of sexual assault and sexual harassment, and it gets talked about and discussed on campus, domestic violence, and you see all this stuff, and it's like, okay, why the fuck would I want to be in the cauldron pot of that mess as a man? And you ask yourself, I'm like, why would I want to go to college just to be ridiculed for being a male? And I had that same situation when I went to Towson. Everything was about, women's issues, and they've overly prioritized women going to college, women participating in athletics, and women having a bigger say in campus leadership, and trying to push the male voice out of college campuses. So it goes from being just purely a black thing to now it's a black and white thing. And but with black men, the crisis, we already know there's a band-aid. We put a band-aid on the issue. And one of those things is, I heard in one post, oh, it's because black males aren't reading at grade level. And, they say that black men only read at a sixth grade level and shit. And I'm like, how is that fucking possible? And we've had that conversation before. There are a lot of intelligent men that just chose not to go to college maybe for economic reasons, but also because of the anti male sentiment that a lot of these colleges are having with well, we've already experienced it as a black male, but even with white men, and it's gotten to a point where no male and no man wants to deal with that bullshit. And that's probably one of the main reasons black men are not going to college. That black men are turning to trades, turning to truck driving, turning to something that's going to put money in their pocket instead of them having to do what I've had to do for years. Oh, you need to, you get a degree in something and it doesn't pay off, or you get a degree and they want you to work an internship, they want you to work for free for a couple of years before that whole degree pays off. So then you're stuck in debt. And then with no way to actually really pay it off unless you take a internship or unless you take an entry level job that pays less than $50,000 a year. And even now, $50,000 isn't really enough to even sustain you by yourself, you know. But that's the primary issue. And the bigger issue, and like I said, and I'm going to go back to this again, the anti male sentiment across college campuses. When you go around and you say all men are toxic, toxic masculinity, all this other crap that they keep putting out into the sphere of society, you have all these crazy feminists on campus labeling all men are rapists and all this shit. And it's pushed a wedge between young men and women to where now you have these groups of men who don't want to go to college now in their basements with, podcasters and talking to people like Joe Rogan and all this other shit. And then you got women over here, they're excelling and then they're having jobs that pay over 100K a year over here. And it's like, okay, who really is benefiting and how is the system being set up to benefit one over the other? Because when we look at college degrees are actually doing paying 10 times better for women than it does for men. Men are being looked at now, and especially black men, we're looked at as being hostile and looked at as being a hostile part of the workplace. So when men see stuff like that, when men see the type of rhetoric that they have across campus and who's making the most noise, you know, the only people that are benefiting from a college degree are rich white women and some successful black women. Because you're starting to see more and more of them get into the spear of the spear of a multiracial society in the sense that when they come out of college, they already have jobs which pay them a decent salary. Men are being eviscerated more and more out of society. They're being pushed to the fringes of society, not being allowed to have a voice. And that's an even bigger crisis that we aren't talking about. Of course, we already know what's happening to black men. More of us are going to jail. More of us are getting killed. More of us are being hooked on or addicted to drugs. And the ones that are excelling and the ones that are graduating from college and making those six figures, they get ridiculed even then. We done call them Uncle Toms and Coons and Sambos, all types of crass names because they chose to go to college. And I've seen for years how when black men go to college, how they get treated by their peers, how they get treated by their friends that they grew up with in the neighborhood. It's a travesty. And college is like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I've always been in that situation. My whole entire life is if you don't go to college, then you can't get a decent paying job. But if you do go to college and you rack up all this fucking debt, then now you're overqualified for most of those jobs that those that didn't go to college now have. So then it's like they're not even gonna give you a chance. And they won't even give me a chance in this society. And I've graduated from college and it's been hard as fuck for me to even find a decent job that pays well. And even if I made the decision, I don't regret going to college because I was able to have an open mind. And going to college, the value for me was I got to engage with cultures that were different from mine. When you stuck in the same neighborhood, stuck around the same people, kind of like you live in a vacuum, and there's nothing you can do about it because you chose to stay there. You didn't want to interact with other people. And I went to a white college because, like, for me, going to a PWI was the best decision I had ever made. From going to an HBCU to now going to a PWI, which was Towson. I was engaging with more white people because for a long time I had never engaged with white people before ever till I went to college. Sometimes you gotta get out your neighborhood and get away from your neighborhood friends that you grew up with in order to grow. I think a lot of black men have a very big problem where they surround themselves by the same people with the same talking points with the same bullshit. And that's why a lot of them don't end up going to college. Because if your mamas and whatever and uncles and aunts didn't go to college, you're not going to go to college neither. You're not going to think you need it because you already know you think your life is just going to end up the same exact way. And that's the problem. Most black men ain't even trying. Some are, but not a lot. Because they resolve to give up because of the messaging that they're hearing in the mainstream about who they are, who they supposed to be. And you can't let society dictate who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to dictate who you're supposed to become. And that's a lesson that a lot of us as black men are going to have to learn. I'm an individual first. I'm not a monolith and I'm not a part of a collective group of people that think and do things the same exact way. Some point we're going to have to fall out of line with the status quo and chart our own path back to being an enlightened group of people because right now we just don't have it. And that's why a lot of black men may not be going to college. The financial part is one of the biggest pieces of it, but also the shitty educational system, some of these shitty teachers, and the parents that don't give a damn. That's a problem. And that's a cultural problem that really, to me, I believe has to be fixed. Because cultural wise, black folks are too stuck on looking for somebody to give them something instead of for somebody building it for them. And instead of somebody building it for themselves, instead of them building it for themselves, they looking for somebody else to build it for them. And you can't wait on the system to give you what you can give yourself. If you wait on somebody to cook you dinner, well, what's the use? You might as well cook yourself your own goddamn dinner. I don't know if you understand that one. I don't know if anybody understands that. But self reliance is the only way we're going to get out of these problems. That's the only way. Don't wait for nobody to give it to you. Don't wait for the system to give it to you. Go out there and get it yourself. I had to learn that early on when I was in school. Some of the teachers didn't do much for me, so I had to go out and get it for myself. When they wouldn't provide the information, I provided the information for myself. And that's the most important aspect of life. You got to get it for yourself. Can't wait on nobody to get it. You can't go to college because of a money issue, then go look for scholarships. Go out there and keep searching and keep searching. Don't just wait for somebody to give you an opportunity. Some parts of this, and this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for a lot of black men. Some of y'all gonna have to depend on yourselves, cause ain't nobody coming to save your ass, yo. This is real talk. Nobody's coming to save you. Some of us we walk around with our head hung low. Some of us walk around with a hoodie on because we don't want to look ourselves in the mirror sometimes. I had a friend one time, he used to walk with a slump, and he got out of that at one point. But he used to walk with a slump. A lot of us as black men, we walk with a slump through life because we want somebody to embrace us and validate us. When in reality, we should be able to validate ourselves. And I had to make a way to get into college. People made me feel like I wasn't really cut out for college because of where I came from. I'm from Baltimore. But yet, the same college that I went to was the same college that made me feel like I wasn't cut out to be a Morgan student at one point. I had to prove myself to be a Morgan student. And then when I got tired of proving myself, I went to the school 5 miles down from 5 miles down the street because I wanted to thrive. I didn't want to just stay around the same types of people that made me feel useless. If I feel like I'm not being valued someplace, I leave. I don't stay. And that's one of the things we're gonna have to learn as black men is if you don't feel valued for who you are and people treat you a certain way because of where you come from, well, you gotta prove to them that just because you come from where you come from don't mean you're like everybody else. That's where I'm gonna end this. We gotta prove to ourselves to be better men than what the media expects of us as a monolith. I'm Tony J, and this has been another episode of Media Talks TV. Thank you for joining the video. Thank you for listening. And I'll be back with another video. Peace. And I'm out.